Good afternoon. Welcome to the AMCHAM virtual fireside chat with Stephen Dunbar-Johnson, President International of the New York Times Company. I am Michael Claiborne, Government Affairs Manager at AMCHAM. Before we begin today's webinar, allow me to briefly introduce the program. Our program will begin with opening remarks from AMCHAM Chairman and CEO James Kim. Next, we will hear a presentation from our special guest, President Dunbar-Johnson of the New York Times Company. Following the presentation, Chairman Kim will lead the fireside chat with our special guest before taking time for questions from the audience. We do hope for an interactive discussion, so you are strongly encouraged to ask questions. You can type in your question at any time by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Now, I would like to ask you to give your attention to AMCHAM Chairman and CEO James Kim for the opening remarks.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon. What a great day for today's virtual meeting. I am so excited about today's session. As you know, we have hosted around 15 webinars so far since COVID, and they've all been really fantastic. And because of COVID, we were very fortunate to have hosted a wide range of expert speakers from all over the world. Today, we have a very special guest joining us from London. I am super excited to introduce Stephen Dunbar-Johnson, the President of International of the New York Times Company. He has led New York Times global expansion since 2013. And I'm sure all of you are quite familiar with New York Times. It is one of the most iconic US media companies. And for me, having lived in New York City for close to a decade, I used to wake up to the New York Times every day, and I love it. As you may have read, the New York Times recently announced personnel from Hong Kong moving to South Korea. They've also joined AMCHAM as a corporate partner, and their decision to build a presence here is really, really important to all of us. I spent some time with Stephen and his team a few weeks ago, and I'm sure many of you are quite excited and curious as to their move to Seoul, along with their future strategy for Asia. Today's session is also a learning opportunity about the various dynamics shaping the global media landscape and how it affects all of our businesses. Today, I'm going to do a fireside chat followed by hopefully a lot of great questions from the audience, and I'm sure Stephen's insights will be very beneficial for all of us. So without further ado, let me welcome Stephen for his brief comments. So Stephen, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Stephen.
Good, good. Hi, well, thank you, Jim. Thanks so much for organizing this. We're very, very pleased to be able to join you this morning. And I'm also actually on the phone here on the line here. I just wanted to let you know that Adrian Carter, who is our Asian editor,
could you unmute to turn on your video? I think it's off right now from your side. There we go.
Sorry about
that. Now you're on.
Hello. So let me start again. Jim, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you for organizing this gathering this evening, your time, my time, morning. I just wanted to say that Adrian Carter, who's our Asian editor, is also, and Helena Poix, who runs our Asian business operation, is listening in as well. It's actually a real pleasure for me also to be on the line today because AMCHAM as an organization is an organization I've been quite close to for many years. I was sat on the board of AMCHAM in Paris for a number of years. So I'm very familiar with the organization. We've worked closely with AMCHAM in a number of markets. But I don't think actually, and Jim, I'm saying this not just because I'm on the call with you guys this morning, but I don't think we've had such a constructive lean-in early introduction to AMCHAM as we've had with you, in the way that you've embraced us so quickly and early, and how helpful you've been. So I really want to thank you for that. I'd also like to thank the Consulate General in Hong Kong, the South Korean Consulate General, who's been extremely helpful, as have the Ministry of Justice, MCST, and COTRA. All of those organizations have really helped us since, actually in the preceding decision to move to Seoul. So I'd like to thank everybody. We're very happy to go to Seoul. It was a decision that took a bit of time. We can go into why we made the decision to go to Seoul during our conversation. But I can say that so far, as I just alluded to, the reasons for making that decision have been fully validated by the reception we've had by all concerned. So we're thrilled to be coming, and I'm very, very happy to answer all of your questions over the next 45 minutes or so. Thank you.
Thank you for the brief introduction, Stephen. Obviously, you've done so much for the company, and I wish I could give you even a bigger introduction, but let's focus on some of the questions that I think a lot of the audience members will be interested in. Clearly, one of the first questions that I get asked is about your reasons for coming to Seoul. There are a lot of great cities in Asia. Obviously, there's something about Seoul that you must have liked for you to have considered moving part of your team here. So can you walk us through some of that?
Yeah, it was, we made a decision probably, I would say 18 months, maybe 2 years ago, that that Hong Kong was likely to become more difficult for us to do our journalism. And at that point, we started looking around for other places where we might locate particularly our digital hub. This is the most important thing for us, and I'll explain that later. And so when we started that process, we were fairly strident about it, but also careful in looking at various criteria. Now, the most important criteria for us was always going to be freedom of the press. So when you have a sort of weighting matrix system where you put a score on the value of something, and the most important value for us was ability to do our work and the conditions of freedom of the press. So that was number one. Then we looked at a whole range of other things: ease of communication, ease of doing business, ease of getting visa applications through, real estate costs, schooling, education, quality of life. All of those things are given a various weighting. And Korea came out top. Korea came out top because your freedom of the press is extremely high. Your rankings are very high. Ease of doing business is good. Visa applications, as we're discovering, has been very easy. Communications are good. And then the sort of practical, pragmatic things around the geographic location were important too, because Korea is strategically extremely well placed in that we can reach China. China's a huge story for us. Japan, obviously. So the geographic location is extremely important too. So you put all those things together, it became evident that Seoul was the right place for us to be.
Stephen, I think that you did a phenomenal job of articulating why so many people are here in Korea. And as you know, here at AMCHAM, we have a lot of expats who's made Seoul their home, and they're very happy about it. I'm also a Korean American, very happy here in Seoul. So you're going to have a lot of fans behind you. So thank you for the transparency and explaining why you decided to come to Seoul. I know that.
Well, I mean, we looked at this with a blank. We started with a blank piece of paper and then went through all of this pretty rigorously. There wasn't too much sentiment attached to it. We just looked at, as I say, the vital thing is our ability to do our journalism without fear or favor journalism. That is always going to be a central thing, and then everything else falls into that: the geography, the cost of living, and all the other aspects. But we're very happy.
And I tell you, Stephen, in speaking with Helena and Adrian and Jaspers of the world, you guys are really thorough in what you do. So I'm sure you guys gave it a very good study before making that decision. And I hope that it becomes a great decision for I know a lot
Uh,
of your team
confident,
members.
I'm confident it will.
Yes, and I know a lot of your team members have not really spent a lot of time in Korea. So what is your team most looking forward to about life in Korea? Are there any concerns as well from a practical lifestyle situation?
Yeah, look, I mean, by the way, I've visited Seoul on quite a few occasions as well. We have our partner, Yongang Libo there. We've had a partnership there for 20 years. It's one of our strongest printing partnerships. So I've had many occasions to come to Seoul myself. It's an important market for us. So a lot of us are pretty familiar with Seoul. Now, I mean, there's always a certain anxiety when you're moving people from one place to another. We're all human beings. We have families, we have children. So I think those concerns are really probably around that, is how are we going to settle in? How are we going to get our kids into good schools? How are we going to settle our kids in? Where are we going to live? All of those very human things we have to take into account in a move like this. So it becomes very important that we look after our teams and make sure that they're happy and they settle in, and we try and facilitate that as easily as possible. So I guess the concerns are simply really around that, how quickly we can get our folk in, how quickly they can get settled in and happy and stable, and so they can do their job and have good lives. I think actually that's the human story of moving folk. It's more, you move from the numbers to the reality of the people, and making sure that they're happy, they're safe, and they can do their work freely. But having said that, I think that once you get into the rhythm, I think from what I've heard from people, they're very excited to be going to Seoul, to learn about the country. It's got a rich food culture, it's got a great film culture. So I think people are generally and genuinely excited about the move, after they're getting over that initial anxiety of how am I going to settle in. But again, I think, and I want to thank again the folk that have helped alleviate some of those concerns around schools, and around helping us, giving us advice around housing, etc., because all of that is very important.
Well, we hope that as you folks settle into South Korea, you can always look at AMCHAM to help you in any way. Okay, so please count on us. But now let's talk a little bit about your business in South Korea. What is your vision for the New York Times in the Korean market? And do you have a target audience here in Korea? I know you plan on having a lot of the editorial team here in South Korea, but obviously, you want a lot of people to subscribe to the New York Times, right? Yeah,
of course. Well, I should say that what we're doing is we're moving our digital hub to Seoul. And to give you a bit of context, what does that mean? It means that over the years, the last few years, or actually decade, we've built up a presence in Hong Kong, in Asia, a digital presence. And that goes to the heart of the strategy of the New York Times, because we are a digital subscriptions business. In other words, we want people to pay for our content. And in order to do that, we felt that to build our website, we needed a presence, a global presence. And we established this team in Hong Kong. We've also got a very large team in London. And so as the sun rises in the east, we would, the team have the hands on the website in Hong Kong, and then it moves over. So that team is now moving to Seoul. So it's really a global picture. We've chosen Seoul, looking at our global operation. So that's the first thing I'd like to say. But secondly, in terms of Korea is a very interesting market for us, and for a number of reasons. One is, as I said earlier, we've had a print relationship in Seoul for 20 years, a very good print relationship. It's our second largest Asian circulation market for print. It is a market, though, where we don't have, I don't believe we have enough penetration in digital subscriptions. I think there's a lot of potential there. And I will start with, and I hope this goes to your question about the audience. I'll start with young people. Korea has a reputation for very, very top quality education. It also has, I believe, 60,000 odd students going to the United States every year. So there's this very strong relationship, education relationship with young people flowing to the United States and going back again. Highly educated, intellectually curious, internationally curious, frequently traveling young people, smart young people. Frankly, all 60,000 I aspire to get as subscribers to the New York Times. If you think about it, they should. That is exactly the target audience of people that we look at. Specifically, highly educated, internationally curious, frequently traveling, mobile people who tend to work. A lot of them go on to work for international organizations. All of those are all of the ingredients that we look for potential subscribers to the New York Times. So, Korea, you have in your market a very significant number of those people, and I think we need to do a better job of reaching them and demonstrating to them the value of subscribing to the New York Times and the relevance of subscribing to the New York Times. So just starting from that point, Jim, I think there's a lot of potential for us in Korea. I'm looking at the board behind you with all of those company names, very well-known company names. Yes. Established in Korea. All of them have lots of employees there. Frankly, these are all international companies. I aspire that all of them will be taking subscriptions to the New York Times as well as corporate subscriptions. So, we're excited to go there because we think not only is it a stable place from which to operate our global operations, but also we think there's a lot of potential in the market itself.
And that's why I'm so excited to have you today. Just when you look at our audience, we have the CEO of Qualcomm Korea here. We even have the chief digital officer for one of the largest Korean conglomerates, CJ, here with us as well. Because he really wants to learn about your insights and vision. So we have a lot of our board of governors joining us. So this is a very special session for all of us. You mentioned education. I think you know that Korea supplies the third largest number of students into the United States school system. So again, that's a great base for you to really help these students understand the New York Times and just the cross-border opportunities.
Yeah.
I studied your background, and I know you really started the international business for the Times. And it's one of the few media companies that I know of that has thrived in the internet side of the equation. So how did your company succeed at a time when so many companies are having a hard time adapting?
Well, you're very flattering about me starting I think that's there are other people that have been very involved in this, but thank you for that. Certainly my background is international. I worked at the Financial Times for 12 years before joining the International Herald Tribune, which was part of the New York Times. So the New York Times has actually had an international background for some time through its ownership of the International Herald Tribune newspaper. So it's sort of eased into international fairly, and that actually was the reason why it took full control of the International Herald Tribune, is to develop its international smarts. It was quite visionary in that respect. But to your question specifically, I think we have to go back to 2008, the financial crisis in 2008, where as we emerged from that financial crisis, we emerged, frankly, pretty battered as an organization, financially battered. We had to do things like sale leaseback of our building in New York. We realized that the advertising market, which had plummeted in 2008, was seriously jeopardized. And we had to confront the fact that what is the mission of the New York Times? The mission of the New York Times is to support its newsroom. And back then we had a newsroom of 1,200 women and men. And we asked ourselves the question, if advertising is not going to recover properly, how are we going to sustain our mission, and continue to have the output of our journalism around the world? And so we realized actually that vision was that we had to diversify out of advertising. We thought that advertising was going to continue to be extremely important to us, but we needed another revenue stream, and that was essentially why we decided back in 2008, with the whole process of starting to get people to pay. We had to get people to pay for our content. But that was a very difficult process, because it wasn't actually until 2011 or so that we actually launched our pay model. We went through lots of various versions of how we would do this, but we launched the pay model, believing then that we could get people to subscribe to the New York Times, pay for the quality of the content, and that proved successful. And over time, we realized that we needed to really double down on that strategy, because frankly, the emergence of the platforms, Google and Facebook, who were becoming increasingly successful at taking digital advertising off of the table for content producers such as ourselves. So we realized again that the advertising market was fragile, was going to get likely increasingly fragile, and therefore it was very important for us to develop this stream of revenue from subscriptions. And as you can see from this chart here, this is a chart by McKinsey that was released recently. It shows the development of that strategy since we launched the pay model, and our subscriptions revenue, our subscriptions growth has now been well, it's pretty impressive. We have 6.5 million total subscribers. 5.7 million of those are digital only. We have digital revenue now exceeds print for the first time in our history, which is very important to us. And critically, our newsroom, as I said earlier, when we started this process, was around 1,200 women and men. It's now 1,700. And that goes to the heart of really the strategy that we have. In order to get people to pay, you need excellent journalism. And so we have invested considerably in expanding our newsroom. And we will continue to do so. The strategy is really based, it's pretty simple and complicated at the same time. Simple in that the vision is, if you invest in journalism, you will get people to come to your content. You need to then really understand the reader, the consumer, the customer. And we spent a lot of time trying to understand our customer, getting much more smarter about understanding our customer, our reader, and making sure that the customer journey is a fulfilling one. And thirdly, it's technology. Back in 2008, technology was the enemy, in a sense, of a lot of legacy media organizations. It was changing our business model dramatically. And there was a lot of fear about and angst about technology. But actually, technology is a huge enhancer for our business. It allows us to get to many, many more people than we can ever get to before. It can allow for a very rich reader experience. So all of those things have been very important. I think having a clear strategy around invest in the journalism, the most important what I call lighthouse, is critical. Then understanding your customer, which frankly in the old legacy news business, newspapers were not very good at understanding the customer. You produce a newspaper, you send it out, put it on the doormat in the morning, and we weren't very responsive to how people were seeing this thing. So we've had to learn over the last decade or so how to get good at that, and we've still got a long way to go, frankly, but we're a lot better than we were. And as I said, technology in terms of how to get to more readers, technology in terms of how to make the user experience more better, how to make journalism work more effectively. You can do that through visual journalism, visual investigation, which is a big part of our business now, graphics, virtual reality in stories. Anything that can make the journalism work better, but fundamentally it's about the journalism, about having high quality, rigorous, without fear or favor journalism. And so that's sorry, it was a rather lengthy monologue. So but that's our strategy.
No, but Stephen, in looking at those numbers you just showed, a big congratulations to you. Looks like a huge growth. And what I hope you can achieve in Korea is because of technology innovation in Korea. This might be a very powerful hub for you to learn more, expand your technology to not just Korea, but to other countries in the world, because Korea really is a leader in broadband and all the technology that it offers. So I hope that it's a big benefit for you and the Times. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I should have said that up front. In the criteria that we were looking at with Seoul, clearly technology is very important to us. We need to make sure that the connectivity is and there's no better country in the world, I don't think, than South Korea for that. So that was very much a factor. And you know, we've had long relationships with Samsung. We've done a lot of work with Samsung in the past, both as an advertiser. We've had marketing partnerships with them. I've had the pleasure and honor of visiting the Samsung laboratory, but we know not just them, but there are lots of very sophisticated tech companies there, and that can only be good for us and developing relationships with them. We look forward to that.
Oh, that's great. So let's talk about just media in Korea. You know, you've had significant leadership positions at the Times. So how do you view media in Korea? Are they same as other countries? Are there a lot of uniqueness about Korea? Because I know the audience is really fascinated to learn about that from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, every market is very different, and again, our relationship with Yungang has given us a little bit of an insight into the Korean marketplace. It's as you would expect. I think it's a fairly sophisticated marketplace. So South Korea is a very evolved economy now. But every market is different, and what has worked for the New York Times doesn't necessarily translate into other markets. I work quite closely with an African media company called Nations Media Group in East Africa, and every time I work with them, I'm struck by how different the market is to ours. And we're not just an American organization. We work across the globe. But in Korea, I think that some of the lessons that we've learned, I think, are applicable to Korea, because I do think that the print advertising market is going to continue to be a difficult model, as younger people continue to not go to print. I don't know what your kids do, Jim, but mine don't really look at print. They do occasionally, but mostly they read their news. They read quite a lot of news, but they read it on their phones or on their devices. And I suspect that's pretty similar from where you are. And therefore, it's very important that we reach them in the medium in which they want to get, and not necessarily fight a winning battle. Having said that, I think that for us, print is still extremely important. It's still making a lot of money. It's still very profitable. Print is a different experience. I mean, you're a little wiser, like a good cheese. So you lean back, and that lean back experience of print, I think is fantastic. And actually, interestingly, we've had quite a lot of people in this market who we've been doing a lot of trialing of the print paper as an interesting experiment in London. And I've got quite a lot of people who are saying that they were suspicious that they wouldn't read the paper, and are now reading it as well as online, but reading it in print. And there's a serendipity about print that they're realizing is really valuable. But I digress. I think really it's about, in Korea, there's a lesson that from our experience. It is, how do you get people to pay for content? I think the advertising model is going to be very difficult and volatile going forward. I don't really see that changing. It's always been susceptible to economic ups and downs, but now there are the other platforms that are continuing to gain power and ability to target advertising in a way that's going to make it very difficult for content producers to monetize, which is very frustrating, because we are the ones that have the cost of monetization of creating that content. So getting people to pay for it, finding ways of getting people to pay for it. And there are different ways. The Guardian newspaper, for example, does very well in its membership model.
Sure.
It's a different model to ours. So there is not necessarily one way, the right way. It depends on the market, idiosyncrasies, behaviors in the market, but getting people to pay for content across their devices, I think, is really important.
And I think this is where your content will hopefully, create so much value where subscribers are going to pay for your content. And we want to obviously help you with that. Earlier when I introduced you to the audience, I talked about how Times is such an iconic and a well-known US brand, globally actually as well. But how do you leverage the American brand to really expand your global, presence? Because I know that in some ways there are some anti-American sentiment in some countries. So has that hurt your business at all? And how do you kind of play the two?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. For us internationally, the challenges and the opportunity are sort of all married. So we have different cohorts of people. We have those that are very attuned to, connected to the United States, and therefore they see the New York Times as the paper of record and a must read, because they want to be connected to what's happening in the United States. That's a very important audience to us, and frankly, it's the easiest. It's like right in the center of the target. Those are the easiest people to acquire. But the next circle around that are the sort of people I mentioned, the characteristics I mentioned earlier, which are people that have connectivity to the United States, may well have been educated in the United States and now back in their home country. They're often working for multinational organizations, and they need to join the dots, and they find that the New York Times, because they were familiar with it from the States and they understand it, has a value. So that's the sort of the next thing. And then the next area, which is it gets increasingly important and big for us, and the potential is significant, are all those people that are smart, well-traveled, etc., but who, when they think of the New York Times, they think of it as an American news, a very high quality American newspaper, but not necessarily for them. And they will be reading their own publications, their own paper of records. And as a result of that, so our challenge is, how do we get them to come to the New York Times and spend some time with us? Because the reality is that, look, last year we reported out of 156 countries around the world. We have 29 bureaus around the world. We are expanding our international coverage and have done over the last 10 years, and we'll continue to do so. In other words, our international coverage is very, very significant at a time where lots of other organizations, media organizations, are shrinking their international coverage. So, and beyond international coverage, and beyond our obviously superb US coverage, culture, science, health, climate coverage, very important, gender coverage, all of these things which are of universal interest, the New York Times does. So the challenge for us is to get people to come to us and spend enough time, and they will recognize the relevance of the New York Times to them, not just as an American newspaper, but as a global newspaper that is worth subscribing to. And for that group of people, we recognize we're likely to be a second read. We don't aspire either, by the way, to become the local publication. We don't want to compete in local news, but we do want the readers that have those characteristics to come to us and have us subscribe to us as a second read, a primary second read. So we think there's a lot of opportunity there, and again, there are a lot of those people with those characteristics in Korea. And I just want to also just reiterate that the strength for us in Korea is an interesting market, because our print product has done very well in Korea, and that's down to our partnership with Jungang Libo. So we've been successful in print in that market, and so we want to. It's not just about digital. We want to explore where people want to read print. We want to keep delivering print, and it has really high value for readers. But it's all of those things working together.
Well, I know a lot of fans of yours here in Korea, so let's hope that it increases to the way you want it to increase. But I need to ask you a quick question about something that's kind of sensitive, but obviously I do want to ask you for it. You know, a lot of the media outlets have come under criticisms from some political figures, including President Trump, in the age of fake news. So how does the New York Times maintain a brand that everybody can trust? I know that that we all want to be politically neutral. So a comment from you on that topic would be very helpful for the audience.
Yeah, look, I mean, so we do not do not set ourselves up as the paper of opposition to Donald Trump, to the president. I know there are certain factions out there that think that we do, but we don't. We don't aim to be the party of opposition. What we want to do is cover without fear or favor, and we want to be as balanced as we possibly can. Now, you have a president of the United States that's very vocal, who's dominates the news cycle and says lots of things which we need to cover and hold him accountable for. So it's an extraordinary time. I mean, when he became president of the United States, and all of the branches of the administration were changed fairly radically. So we had to cover that, and we do. I think one of the challenges for us is that online, digitally, in print, you have a very clear division between opinion and news. And it's very much an American tradition where the opinion side of the house is kept separate from the news side of the house. And in the newspaper itself, there's a very clear space, opinion, and it's there. And I think, especially American readers in print, in the analog world, recognize that division between. And by the way, for the New York Times, these folk are in completely different parts of the building. The editor of Dean Baquet does not have any control on the opinion side. It has a separate editor. He reports, or she reports to the publisher. And Dean Baquet, the editor, reports to the publisher. So you have two editors: an editor of opinion, an editor of news. Now, in the analog world of print, that kind of division it works. It's more complicated online, because if you have opinion on your homepage set, even though you clearly label it as opinion, people often conflate the two. So if we've got opinion columnists who tend to lean left, and they do for us, you know, left by American standards, very centrist by European standards, by the way, then you know, people will say, well, it's a progressive newspaper, it's a liberal newspaper, etc. So that's the challenge for us, and it's something we recognize, and we're doing quite a lot to try and make sure that the roster on our opinion pages is more diverse, both in terms of gender, ethnically diverse, but also politically diverse, trying to find contributors that can represent all sides of the spectrum. But also, how do we make it very clear to readers that this is opinion with a capital O, not news? So I think, going to your question, a lot of the perception of the New York Times being anti-Trump is due to some of the opinion pieces. Something that we're looking at and working on. But I want to stress that we for us on the news side, rigor, independent reporting, factual reporting is what we do. We sometimes get it wrong. When we do, we own up to it. But we are not the newspaper of opposition to Donald Trump, or any president for that matter.
Growing up with the New York Times, I've never looked at the Times as politically motivated at all. So let's move on to China and Hong Kong. So how difficult is it to operate as a media organization when there are clearly restrictions on the freedom of the press? And even you talked about the opinion pieces of your newspaper. Are you even able to provide an opinion piece in Hong Kong or China?
Yeah, look, I mean, the challenge with the Chinese national security law is that how you interpret it is complicated, because what is sedition? One woman's sedition is another man's truth. So I mean, who's going to judge that? Hong Kong has been a fantastic place to do business, and in many respects it still is. I should be clear, we are still committed to Hong Kong. We will still have people based in Hong Kong. We will still have a business operation based in Hong Kong. The challenge we have in Hong Kong is that, as I said at the top of this conversation, the most important thing for us is to protect the independence of our journalism and to be able to operate freely and independently. And that is now being challenged in Hong Kong. Now, we don't know where it's going to go, frankly, Jim. We don't. We hope it's not going to get worse. But we had to make sure that we protect our digital operation, because it's so important to us as an organization. And we felt, therefore, that was the reason why we decided to move to Seoul. But we are going to, we want to remain engaged with Hong Kong. We're hoping that things will not could deteriorate, but there are very worrying signs that things will deteriorate, bluntly. It's much more difficult to get visas now in Hong Kong. That simply wasn't the case even just a year and a half ago. It's becoming, what happened with Apple Daily the other day was of concern. So we're very worried about it, but we remain committed to Hong Kong. It's also a very big story for us. Now, to your question about opinion, we will not self-censor. We will not self-censor because of fear that there will be repercussions from the China. That's not in our DNA. We will never self-censor. We will be circumspect about articles, the opinion articles. They need to be clear, and they need to be strong, and they need to be, validated. But they are opinion articles. They're not necessarily the views of the New York Times. But nor will we self-censor in the news if there's an important news story about Hong Kong or China, which may offend the Chinese authorities, and we think it's important. I'm sure, Adrienne is listening in, but I know Adrienne will be committed to writing without fear or favor. Sure. So we will not self-censor.
And some questions I get from a lot of my American colleagues here is it have been safe for Americans to travel to Hong Kong or China if they ever had a negative view on China, right? And it's kind of concerning. And you guys are obviously in the front and center of that situation in Hong Kong.
Yeah, when you start getting colleagues who have traveled freely all over Asia for many years, voicing genuine concerns about flying into or going into China, or indeed now in Hong Kong, that is a sort of litmus test of concern. It's not great, and as I say, it's very sad because Hong Kong was always such a great place to ease of getting in and out and doing business. So, but we hope things will steady down. We want to remain. We want to keep folk there. We want to continue to do business there. But we'll have to see. We're going to have our eyes wide open and watch as things develop.
Well, hopefully we can read from New York Times about what is the right progress, right?
Of course.
Let me just ask a few questions from the audience. Here's an interesting question. This is from my friend, Mr. Cha, who is the Chief Technology Officer for CJ. His question is, does the New York Times have any interest in providing inside sharing services to businesses as a new revenue source? Because what he's saying is there will be a high interest from Korean companies and organizations. Maybe CJ wants to be a customer of yours.
Yeah, look, I think we want to explore all types of revenue sources. They have to. When we talk to potential partners, it's really about how we can enhance the journalists. How can we make storytelling better, and is there a business model in that? We've been very interested in developing the audio world, for example. I don't know if you listen to the daily podcast which we have, which has upwards of 2 million people tuning in every day now. It's had well over 1 billion downloads on iTunes. It's a hugely successful podcast. And what's been interesting about that is that it's allowed us to get our journalism out on a different platform to a different audience. We get to much more younger demographic audience, many more women, young women. And it gives them an insight into Times journalism, which is very different. It's somewhat empathetic, because each day the daily focuses on one story, and it goes sort of under the hood of that story, and the sort of it takes a little bit of the mystery out of the Grey Lady, you know, and shows how the alchemy is mixed of storytelling, and it's proven to be extremely popular. So we've invested in podcasting. We've invested in a podcatcher where we want to be able to house all of our good content on podcasts, and also other content. So be a filter of the best quality content, and people can come there. So, I mean, that's a sort of a slightly long-winded response to the question, but we're really interested in exploring with partners about how we can connect with readers in ways that are compelling. So if there's a company that can help us do that, we're very interested to talk to them.
Well, you can tell that a lot of the audience members want to help you generate more revenue, so it's interesting. In fact, here's another question. This is from O.H. Kwon, who is the CEO of Qualcomm Korea. Obviously, you know, his question is, Korea is a leader in 5G. His question is, does the New York Times have any plans to adopt immersive video contents, which are possible because of technology from, let's say, Qualcomm?
Yeah, video content is very important to us now, increasingly important in this world of COVID. I mean, here we are on a video conferencing outlet. So yes, we've launched video, like lots of organizations. We're doing a lot of video content now, and that's likely to increase. We're also in the TV business as well. So the audio-visual is important. Look, when I come to Seoul, which I hope to come very soon, certainly not at the back end of October, I should sit down with a lot of your members, and we can talk about this in more detail, about all the opportunities. And I'm very keen to do that. And also Helena Poir, who's one of the most competent business people I've ever had the privilege of working with. She's a dynamo. Helena will be very keen to pick up conversations as well. So both Helena and I will be in Seoul in October, and I would welcome the opportunity to meet as many people as possible, and we can start talking about various opportunities, of which I'm sure there are going to be many, which is one of the reasons why we're so excited to be coming to Seoul.
Well, you should know that Helena Poir has an outstanding reputation from all the people I've talked to so far. So when you come to Korea in October, we're going to be a big host for you folks, because I know a lot of our board members are going to want to meet you. A lot of interesting ideas they want to share with you, and hopefully it can be a win-win for all parties.
Yeah. Helena Poir is a legend, and she's worked me. She's put more grey hairs on my head than I want, because she works all of her colleagues very hard, but she holds us all to a very high standard. So we're looking forward to coming to Seoul and exploring that. Sorry, Jim, I interrupted you.
Oh, that's great. Hey, kind of a different topic. Obviously, Japan is an interesting topic for many Koreans. How does Japan, this is a question from the audience, so how does Japan figure into your vision for Asia? And is Japan very different from how you look at Korea?
So Japan is a very important market to us. It's the largest circulation market we have in print in the world, in fact. We have a relationship with the Japan Times, which is a fabulous relationship. and Japan is obviously a very important economic market. It has one of the world's biggest trading countries. So it's a very, very important part of the Asian mix for us. And you know, I don't think it's a secret to say that Japan was a very close competitor for South Korea when we were looking at where we were going to locate our digital hub. So it's a market that we will continue to invest in and seek subscriptions in. It's a market that we have to cover and will continue to cover intently from a journalistic point of view. It's a massive story, Japan. I think it always will be. But you know, the Korea is a different market for us. I mean, the reason why we chose it is all the reasons I've already given. There's sort of lightness and flexibility there, which is very attractive. And unfortunately, Japan is from a business perspective quite an expensive place to operate. But as a market for us, we see it as from a business perspective very important. Large population, well educated. I think the education market is extremely interesting because you have a lot of people aspiring to read English. I think there is more folk in Korea who have strong connections with the United States. Therefore, the English is not such an issue. By the way, the head of our global consumer marketing is one of the most important positions in the New York Times is Korean. Hannah Yang. Hannah, I hope will come and visit us as well in Seoul because she sees nothing but opportunities. So she grew up in South Korea and moved to the United States after college, I believe, and is one of the smartest people in our company. So we have lots of roots with Korea, but Japan is a very important market to us. The Japan Times is a hugely important relationship to us. We want to maintain it. It's a big print market. The Japanese love print. And any country where they love print, we love them too because it's a good business. So we want to continue and develop our relationships there.
I know we just have several minutes left, but I don't think I asked you a question on COVID at all, right?
Yeah.
Clearly, COVID has impacted a lot of different companies. So how has COVID impacted online subscription and advertising revenue for you folks?
Well, COVID has been actually, I'm going to use the term, we've had a reasonably good COVID in that in the second quarter of this year, we added 669,000 new subscribers to the New York Times, which was the best quarter we've ever had in terms of growing subscriptions. So 493,000 of those were digital, to our digital product, just under 500,000 were for our core digital use. And that's, I think, a reflection of people being locked down and seeking high quality content and being prepared to pay for it. And I think there's been a change in habits which COVID has accelerated over the last year or two, where people are much more comfortable about paying for things online and paying for content online. Obviously, Netflix and Spotify, etc., were leading the vanguard of that, but people now prepared to pay for quality in news content as well, and I think that's reflected in our numbers. So we did extremely well during the lockdown, but we're not alone. I mean, I think it's clear that other news organizations also did well out of COVID in terms of digital subscriptions. But it's really a tale of two businesses in a sense, because you've got a lot of growth in digital subscriptions, but you've got a lot of pressure on advertising, print advertising in particular, which has fallen off a cliff for not just us, but for everybody in the media business. So those that are reliant on advertising revenue have been extremely stressed by COVID. Fortunately, we're not nearly as reliant on advertising revenue as we were 10 years ago. So we're in a much better position. So from a business perspective, it hasn't been too bad for us, I'm pleased to say. From a cultural perspective, I think like for everybody, we're trying to grapple with this remote working I mean, I'm actually calling you from my home in London today. I spend a couple of days in the office here. Very few of us are in the office, and that's in the States. Virtually nobody is in the office, and we're managing to produce a pretty good news output every day. So we can do it. We've been proving to ourselves the last several months that we can do it. What's now really important, we're trying to grapple with, is how important is it to have people together? What are you missing from not having people together? What sort of creativity aspects? And I think, certainly, I'll give my opinion on this. I think it's very important that we do have people together. I don't think we'll ever necessarily get back to where we were before. I think we're still going to have people in different a lot of people working remotely. But I still think we need a rump of folk, particularly actually in the news gathering area, who are working together. And because there's a serendipitous experience, there's creative experience which you get from people being aggregated. So, but we're grappling with this as an organization. What does the future look like? The future of workplace look like? How are we going to organize ourselves? And I think we know it's going to be different, but hopefully it's not going to be at the end of the spectrum where everybody continues to work remotely forever. I think that would not be good for us personally.
You know, Stephen, I know that our time is almost up, so I just wanted to ask you one final question, which is, first and foremost, thank you so much for your transparency. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for being a trailblazer in coming to South Korea to expand your operation for New York Times. Obviously, you know, you're now a corporate member of AMCHAM. We're here to help you. What can we do, our member companies, AMCHAM, can do to help you guys succeed here?
Well, you're already doing it. You're doing it by doing what you've done this morning, by giving us a window here to talk to you and your members. And what you can do is just let's continue. We want to have a very good open relationship with you. We want to get to know the members of AMCHAM well, explore opportunities together. I'd love it if you could all subscribe, and Helena Poir will be pursuing that, I assure you. But I'd love to sit down when I'm next up with as many people as possible, and begin to develop relationships on the ground. It's nothing like, it's again, going back to the earlier question about COVID, I do miss travel. I don't miss the process of travel, I have to say, but I do miss being on the ground, that face-to-face interaction, and so I'm looking forward to meeting people in person. But all I can say to your question is, let's continue on. If we can continue at this level, then that would be terrific. And we're very eager to lean into the AMCHAM and explore how we can work together and to mutual benefit.
Well, we cannot wait to have you, Stephen, come to Korea. Obviously, Helen, Adrian, Jasper, and your whole team. So welcome. We're here for you. So thank you so much today. This has been a fascinating session for the audience, for me, and for everybody here. So please stay healthy.
Well,
see you soon. Okay?
Thank you for your time. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of our program today. Thank you to our special guest, President Dunbar-Johnson, and thank you to everyone in the audience for joining. Have a nice day.